Long-term liabilities. We are here. In your selected problems, you have problem number 1. I am going to let you look at that on your own. Of course, selected problems has an answer key, and I would like to go directly into the long-term liability I like best, which are bonds payable. So we will spend the remainder of this chapter just focusing in on bonds payable. So sometimes I need to borrow such a huge amount of money, that no bank really wants to touch me, right? Because they like to diversify their risk. So they don't want to loan all of their money, because in a roundabout way, money for them is their inventory. They don't want to loan me all of their money, and if I go under, they get stuck, right? They like to loan lots of people money, diversify the risk so that they won't get paid back. So for me to borrow a large amount of money, it's hard to do through one bank. I don't want to structure several long-term debts through several banks. So there was another idea that was evolved over the years that are called bonds. And so I break up this massive debt that I would like to get into $1,000 pieces, $1,000 increments. And so if I need $50 gajillion million, I divide the $50 gajillion million into $1,000 bite-sized pieces, and I offer it as an investment vehicle for individual as well as institutional investors. And what I promise is this: you loan me $1,000 today, and I will pay you interest on that $1,000 every interest period, and at maturity date, I will give you your $1,000 back. And so investors get together and they give me the money. I use it for what I need. These bonds usually are 10, 20, 30-year bonds. Right now, Coca-Cola has a 73-year bond out there. Now that's a little far out there. But regular 10, 20, 30 years. And I promise to pay you some amount of interest every time. Right? So the stated rate of interest is on this bond. And you know this when you invest. Let's just say it's 8%, which nobody's paying 8% now, but pretend with me. I also tell you, in addition to the $1,000, I usually tell you on here, besides the stated rate of interest, interest dates. So maybe I pay every June 30th and 12/31. Maybe I only pay once a year on April 30th. Who knows, right? But I have to tell you, before you invest in this bond, when this interest is paid. All right. Semi-annually, quarterly, annually, the dates that it comes available for me to pay, and this 8% is stated annually. Right? I also have to tell you the maturity date, when I will give you your $1,000 back. So you give me $1,000, I give you 8% interest every year until maturity, and at maturity, then I give you your $1,000 back. That's how it works. Now, this $1,000 is called face value. Stated rate of interest. All right. Now, these things, this is long-term debt. There's usually a significant amount of long-term debt. So I can't just do this without the approval of my shareholders and my board of directors. So at some point, I go and I ask my board of directors, then we ask our shareholders, and they give me approval to issue these bonds, right, to go out and try and find these investors. So I need approval. That usually takes me several months to get. And when I am seeking approval from my shareholders is the time that I pick the stated interest rate. And at the time, at that moment, the stated interest rate was the market rate for the risk that I have in the market. Right? That was what was approved by my shareholders. That's what's approved by my board of directors. Then I have to go find a finance house that will make the prospectus and go out and find the investors for me. And then we have the day of which I issue the bonds. Now, the day I go issue the bonds, we have a real problem, because there's a 99.99% chance that this rate that I've stated on the bond is no longer the market rate. It was the market rate on the day I pitched it to my shareholders, but now that I'm going out in the market, that's not the rate of interest. And then I'm going to have some issues, because if the market rate is different than what's stated on this piece of paper, I'm either going to end up issuing this bond for a discount or a premium, because I cannot scratch this out and put the new interest rate. Whatever interest rate that we got approved for, that's the interest rate I have to pay, always and forever. And so, in a situation right now where the Fed just cut in the emergency our interest rates almost to zero, anybody that's issued bonds recently had a higher interest rate. And they can't just come down and change it, right? They're stuck with the amount that is on that bond. Okay. So let's see how bonds are going to work for us, all right? Now, bonds in general are a liability for me. They're long-term, right? And sometimes they have collateral, in which case they're a secured loan. Otherwise, if they have no collateral, they are debenture bonds. But all bonds, for the most part, are rated by either Moody's, right, or some other, and there's a grade on there, right? And that will indicate what the likelihood of my paying this interest and the money back. Not only that, like the stock market, there is a bonds market, and if at any point you, the investor, decide you don't want to hold us anymore, then there's a million people that will buy this bond today from you, and then you can change ownership. So I never, as the issuer, have to worry about it. You all have a market to change bonds amongst yourselves. So let's look at an example. And right now, this example, we are going to use number 2. We're going to use it for a few different, okay? So the first one says that we have, and this is not, right, a typical example. Most people issue bonds for a lot more than 4 years, but I just want to keep it simple for us, okay? And we don't usually do it for only $800,000. But the face value of the bonds I'm about to issue are $800,000, right? They're 4-year bonds, and they pay the stated rate of interest 6%. And we're going to pay this interest at 6% annual, but I'm going to pay semi-annually. So I'm going to pay interest 6/30, 12/31. And it says, what are the journal entries from the moment we issue them all the way to the time that they mature, assuming that A says the bonds were issued at 100. When I use the term 100, I mean 100% of face value. All right? So if they're issued at 100, it equals 100% of face value. And what that typically means is that the stated rate of interest on my bond happens to equal the market rate of interest on the date of issuance. So the stated rate equals the market rate. So if I issued a 6% bond at 100, it means that on the date of issuance, the market rate of interest was also 6%. So I could issue it at face. So on January 1, year 1, I received cash of $800,000. And I put on my books bonds payable, $800,000. I get to the first interest date, June 1, no, how about June 30th, year 1. I have an interest expense, and I send out cash. And my interest expense, well, this is $800,000 of bonds. The going interest rate is 6%, and I have now had these outstanding for 6 months. So if I take $800,000, multiply by 6%, multiply by 6 over 12 months, all right, we're going to get $24,000 of interest. So I cut checks for $24,000. I send them to my investors. Then on December 31st, I cut another set of checks for $24,000 and I send them to my investors. These are 4-year bonds. In years 2, 3, and 4, I'm going to make the same entry. They're going to get their checks for $24,000 and they're going to be happy with me. And on December 31st, year 4, when this bond matures, I will send them their last interest payment, but also I have to give them face value back. So this is where I give them the $800,000 back. We've got bonds payable on the books. I'm going to feed it out to cash and send out checks to all my original investors, assuming that the original investors still hold these bonds. If for some reason the investor along the way got tired of me or found something better to invest in than me, they could go out to the bond market, sell the bond, and at the end somebody else would have the bond and I would end up paying those people. But in this case, when the market rate equals the stated rate of interest, life is good. It's this simple. But let's take a second example. Let's go to B. It says, these are your bonds, right? You're 800,000, 4 years, 6%, interest payable twice a year. But instead of paying or being issued out at 100, you only issued them at 98. Okay. So I issued them for less than face value. Why, you might ask? Well, this is when the market rate isn't equal to the stated rate. So I issued at 98, which means 98% of face value. So, we have $800,000. If I take 98% of this, I'm going to get $784,000. And this is how much money people give me, investors, up front. But regardless of what I issue this bond at, 100, 102, 109, 92, 85, it doesn't matter. Whatever I issue this bond at, I am required to pay face value at maturity. So even though I only get $784,000 today, I am required to pay out $800,000, the face value of this bond at maturity. Now you ask, well, why did people give me less for it? So we're offering, don't forget, 6% interest. And everybody that is an investor, for the most part, wants to earn the highest rate of return on their investment dollars. And when we got to market, the 6% that I can't change on my bonds was not the market rate. It ends up the market rate was higher. So let's just say the market rate of interest on the day I issued my bonds was 7%. I can't change my rate to 7%. I'm stuck with 6%. But at a 7% market, everybody wants 7%, and they look at my bonds like trash. Like dog meat. Because why would anybody give me $1,000 where I'm going to pay them 6% interest when everybody else in the world is offering 7%? And at that point, my bonds get discarded. Nobody wants to invest in my bonds because I'm not paying what everybody else is paying. So in the end, I agree. I said I make a deal with them. I agree to accept less. You only give me $784 today, but I promise to give you $800 at the end. Then at that point, I'm making up that lost interest with my maturity payment. All right. So in the end, I'm going to give them $16,000 more than they paid up front, and that will hopefully cover all the difference in interest. Okay. So we call this a discount. When I issue the bond for less than face value, I've issued it at a discount. And the reason I've done that is because the market rate of interest is so much better than mine. I've got the crappy interest rate that I have to, in essence, put my bonds on sale. So let's look at the journal entries. So on January 1, year one, I received cash of $784,000. But if you remember, leave me a debit here, I am required to pay face value back at the end. Therefore, I have to put this bond on my books at $800,000. The $16,000 is discount on bonds payable. I'm just going to call it discount. So this is a contra liability. So I've got bonds payable on my books here, $800,000. And then I've got discount on my books currently with a debit balance of $16,000. And at any time, like book value for assets, carrying value of a bond equals face value of the bond plus my premium or minus my discount, carrying value. So at first, the carrying value of this bond is $784,000 because my face value is $800,000 and currently my discount $16,000. $784 at the moment I issue the bond. So let's go to my first interest payment. I'm going to have an interest expense, and I've got to send them cash. But at some point, I need to amortize this discount down to zero by maturity. So I'm going to credit this discount. There are two ways of which I could amortize this discount. I could use the straight line method, or I could use the effective interest method. We will use straight line. So, cash. Cash is the same as it ever was before. I am required to pay 6% on this $800,000. So if I take the $800,000, multiply by the 6%, multiply by half a year, I'm going to come up with $24,000. This is no different than before, as if I had issued them at face. But now interest expense for us is going to be what we call a plug, meaning that I know all debits equal all my dollars and credits. So I'm going to leave this for the last one, and I'm just going to solve for x, right? So straight line amortization of the discount says you take this discount. Well, currently the discount has a balance of $16,000, and you divide by the number of interest periods. So let's think about this. This is a 4-year bond. We pay interest twice a year. I've got 8 interest periods. So if I take the $16,000, divide by 8, I am going to amortize this discount $2,000 every interest period. And the $24,000 plus the $2,000 is $26,000. When I do this, when I post a discount, I do this. Great thing about straight line, we already know this, is that it means everything will look the same for the rest. So when I go to December 31st, my journal entry to pay interest is going to be identically the same. I'm going to debit interest expense, $26,000. I'm going to credit discount, $2,000. And I'm going to credit cash and send my investors, because I am required to send them what I told them I would send them, which is 6% a year. I send them their 6%. Okay. So at the end of year one, December 31st, I post this here as well. So if I look at the next page of my questions, it says, assuming that these bonds were issued at 98, it says, what is the carrying value of the bonds at December 31st after year one, after interest is paid? So I've paid interest here. So if I take the discount and get up the balance in this account, 16 minus 4 is 12. And I come back here and I look at my formula for carrying value. I would say that the carrying value after the end of year one is $788,000. So my interest journal entries are the same every year. So this will be for years 2, 3, and 4. This will be for years 2, 3, and 4. We will repeat. And when I do that and I post all of these to discount, do we agree that discount goes to 0? So when we get to the end of year 4, or at maturity, when discount equals 0, then my carrying value equals now face value. So when I look at D, it says, well, assuming that the bonds were issued at 98, and what is the carrying value of the bonds at December 31st, year 4, after interest is paid? It's face value. Whenever we get to maturity, whether I have a discount or a premium, it better be face value, carrying value at maturity. So we've got one last entry. I issued the bond with a discount. I've amortized that discount over every interest period, plus paid the required amount of interest. Now I get to December. I don't have enough room down there. Well, that's unfortunate. I want to put it up here at the top. I'm at December 31st, year 4, and it's maturity. I've got to pay back my investors. Now, yes, they only gave me $784, but at maturity, I'm required to pay them back face value. Hence, I put it on my books at face value. I will debit bonds payable $800,000, credit cash $800,000. So the opposite of a discount is a premium. It means that I actually get more than face value at the day of issuance. And the only reason that people would throw money at my feet and not make me pay it back at the end, because remember, at maturity I only have to pay back face value. The only reason they would pay me more up front and know that I'm not going to give it back to them at the end is because my interest rate must actually be higher than market rate. So everybody sold their soul to throw money at me and invest in my bonds. So our example says, let's assume the bonds were issued at 104. Go from start to finish with these bonds. And assume straight line amortization. So we can do that. We can. So if I issue these at 104, it means that I got 104% of face value. So doing our math, at 104 equals 104% of the $800,000 face value. I got $832,000 on issuance day. I'm only required to pay back $800,000. So that $32,000 becomes a premium for me. So I received on January 1, year 1, I received cash of $832,000. I'm going to credit bonds payable for $800,000 because this is all I owe at maturity. And then I have a premium. So let's draw up our T account for premium. It has a credit balance of $32,000. So on day of issuance, carrying value is face value plus premium or minus discount. So in this case, we have a premium. So my carrying value is $832 on date of issuance. Let's go ahead and pay our interest. So here we are. We're June 30th, year 1. I've got interest expense, which again is going to be my plug. I need to make premium go to 0 over the life of this bond. Notice that premium has a credit balance. Therefore, I need to debit premium to make it disappear. And I'm doing it straight line. there's $32,000 in premium. I need to divide it by the number of interest periods, which there are 8. This gives me $4,000 debit. And then cash, it's going to be the same $24,000 I've been paying. Right? That is the $800,000 times the 6% times half a year. Therefore, when I plug my interest expense, it's going to be $20,000. I will have the same entry at December 31st, year 1. Debit interest expense, $20,000. Debit premium, $4,000. Credit cash, $24,000. So, one of our questions says, what is the carrying value at the end of year 3? So be careful, this is the end of year 1. So let's look at this. At the end of year 1, I have posted 4,000 and 4,000. This was year 1. Then the next year, because these entries are going to be the same, so I do this in year 2. Then I come back and make this entry in year 3. So it says, what is carrying value at the end of year 3? So when I get the balance in premium, I get an $8,000 credit balance. I come over here to my formula, face value plus premium equals carrying value. I would have said our carrying value was $808,000. Let's carry this through all the way through. Finish this up year 4. So at this point, when I post here, premium goes to 0. At any given point, at maturity, your carrying value better equal your face value. Okay, so we only have one more entry. It is now maturity date. So at December 31st, year 4, I have bonds payable in my books. I'm paying it back, $800,000, and I'm giving cash $800,000. Because even though I got $832 up front, I'm never required to give back any more than face value. Okay, let's take a little break, and then we're going to come back and look at callable versus convertible bonds. So in addition to our regular type of bonds, where they all mature at the same time, there's other types of flavors of bonds. In fact, that's the vanilla flavor, right? I could issue bonds that some of them mature every year. So if it's a 10-year bond, maybe 1/10 of them retire every year, and I use a lottery system to decide which ones get retired. That's a serial bond. I could have a convertible bond, and these are very popular. They wouldn't be very popular in today's market right now, because of course the stock market is relatively tanked. But when I go to issue a bond, right, let's say I have this $1,000 face value bond, say the rate's 8%, I pay interest every June 30th, right, 12/31. But on the bond, I tell you, this bond is convertible, and it's convertible into 10 shares of my common stock. So it is convertible at the whim of the investor. That would be the person that loaned me the $1,000. And at the day of issuance, my stock is only worth $30. So they just gave me $1,000, and I promised to pay them 8% interest every year up until maturity on this $1,000 and give them their $1,000 back. Nobody in their right mind would give me $1,000 and then turn around and trade this piece of paper for 10 shares of stock that's only $30. It's only $300. You just spent your money and bought 10 shares of my stock, right? So nobody's going to convert at this point. But remember, this is a long-term liability. Maybe this is a 20-year bond. So what happens as time goes on, I pay you, the investor, your 8% interest every year. But as time goes on, the stock market goes up and up and up, right? And one day, You look at the stock market, and my shares of stock are selling for $160 a share. And you're like, woohoo! Because I can change this bond, you can change this bond, the investor, for 10 shares of my stock. Well, 10 shares times 160 is $1,600. You might actually want to cash out, get the shares of stock, right? You'll give me my bond back, and now I don't have to pay you $1,000. Woohoo for me, right? Because those shares of stock, I opened up a drawer and I sent you a piece of paper. With the expense of administrative costs, it costs me nothing to give you those 10 shares, right? So you get 10 shares, I don't have to pay this debt back. I'm happy. You're happy because if you wanted to, you could open up an E-Trade account and sell these 10 shares in no time, flat, and have $1,600, which was probably better than the interest that you might have received plus $1,000. Or you could you could keep the stock. And over time, I might pay you dividends, which might almost be as good as the interest. And then maybe the stock will continue to go up. And maybe one day it'll be worth $200. But at that point, that's your call. You're the investor. You're the one that loaned me the $1,000. It's up to you whether you want to cash this in and get the 10 shares. Right? And when I issued this, I had no idea what my stock price might do over the years. So it was just a gamble for me. But I don't have to pay this $1,000 back because if you convert this bond into shares of stock, then I'm not required to pay you the maturity value back anymore, and I can take this debt off of my books. So in addition to convertible bonds, right, where you, the investor, at your whim, get to convert it, and most bonds aren't convertible, right, but some are. It gives them flavor. Another flavor of a bond, besides the serial bond, in which the dates rotate in which they are matured, and a convertible bond, which is convertible into shares of stock, there's this idea of a callable bond. So again, it still has a face value, still has a stated rate, I still pay interest, but then I tell you it's callable. You, the investor. But it's callable at my whim, not yours. And I put dates that I could call it. I might pick the Ides of March in year 15 and, I don't know, December 8th, year 20. And if these are the dates I put on this bond, on these 2 days and these 2 days alone, right? Because I have to give you the dates on the bond before you invest. It's not going to be a mystery, right? On these 2 days, I have the option to, quote, call the bond. And you have no choice as the investor. You have to cough it up to me. Not only that, I tell you what the call price is. So maybe I put the call price here to be 101 and the call price here to be 97. Right? So that means percentage of face value. So if on either one of these 2 days, or however many days I list on here as potential call days, I want to call this bond in and mature it right then, like in essence, bring the maturity date to one of these days, I have every right? And you have no choice but to cough it up. So why would I do this? Well, if right now the interest rates are high, and they're not, but if they were, like back in the 80s, and this was going to be a long-term liability, this was an escape clause. It was a parachute clause, so that I could get out of it at any point. So I'm paying high interest because at that time that's the market rate of interest. High, 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 high. And now interest rates are like 0, right? So with a callable bond, I could call the bond on one of the dates, retire the bond, and just issue new bonds out at the interest rate today, which is much, much lower. So it would reduce my debt load. Right? Maybe not my debt load, but my interest load, right? But right now, interest is almost 0, right? People can borrow money for almost 0%. So we don't see a lot of call on these because there's no reason that I want to get out of a 0% debt or close to 0, right? But back in the day, right, I couldn't tell you in year 15 or 20, just like I can't tell you now 15 or 20 years from now what the economy is going to be like, what the interest rate is going to be like. And so when I had the high interest rates back in the 80s, I put these escape clauses in there so that if interest rates actually did go down, I could get out of it, right, and just reissue new debt at the low rates. But again, we don't seem to have that so much right? Because right now interest rates are close to zero. So we will not see a lot of call. But if we did, it just means that I can bring it back in, redeem them, mature them all, take them off the books, and reissue them at a lower rate. So let's look at an example of a call note. And that's number 3 on our selected problems. So it says that on January 1st, we have $300,000, 5-year, 4% callable bonds at 106. All right, we issued them at 106. It says the call price is 102. And on December 31st, year 2, after interest is paid, Megan called the bonds. So it says prepare all the entries from issuance to call. It appears that the interest is paid only annually, which makes our life a little easier. So I have $300,000 face that I issued at 106. So if I take the 300,000, 106, I issued these at 318. So on January 1, year 1, I received $318,000. These bonds were issued at a premium. I am only required to pay $300,000 at maturity, and this is my premium. So I have a question for you. If these are 4% bonds, and I issued in a premium, on date of issuance, was the market rate of interest above or below 4%, our stated rate? Think about this. I'm here to tell you that if people are throwing money at my feet for 4%, it means that the market rate of interest has to be worse than mine. They think mine is great. So the market rate of interest had to be below 4%. So, we pay interest in this example only once a year. So here it is, December 31st, year 1. Here is premium to start with. We have a credit of $18,000. So, year 1, I'm going to debit interest expense. I need premium to come to 0, so I need to be debiting it, and I'm going to credit cash. So let's go ahead and do this premium. We pay interest once a year. This bond is 5 years. I'm going to divide it. Just give me $3,600 I'd like to debit. So in the first year, $3,600. Cash, this is a $300,000 face value. I promise 4% interest a year. And I don't have to multiply it by some months, right? Because I get the whole year. It's for a whole year's worth. So let's say $12,000 of interest of cash that I pay. And then if I subtract out the $3,600 to plug interest expense, it's $8,400. So I make this entry in years 1 and year 2, and then I call the bond. So let's see what the carrying value of my bond is. So the premium is sitting out here at $10,800. I know the carrying value is face value, $300,000, plus the premium, or minus the discount. In this case, I have a premium. So I'm thinking the carrying value is $310,800. And it says I called it at 102. So there's a chance I could have a gain or a loss, right? It's going to be like fixed assets. If I can pay off my debt for more or less than what I have it on my books for, I could have a gain or a loss. So it says I called these bonds. The call price is 102. So let's look at call price. So you take face value, $300,000, multiplied by call price. This gives me $306,000. I have debt on my books for $310,000 and change, and yet all I had to do was pay $306 to make it disappear. I've had a gain on this extinguishment of debt, right? Because I got to pay less than what it's on my books for. Right? So when it comes to debt, that's a gain. So I have a gain of $4,800. And if we remember from last chapter, gains or credits. So here it is, it's December 31st, year 2, I called this bonds. I get to take all these bonds off of my books. I also have to take premium all the way off the books. So let's go ahead. Right now, premium is sitting out there at a $10,800 credit balance. To make it go away, I'm going to have to debit it $10,800. So let's go ahead and do this. When I do that, that goes to 0. Gains we decided are credits. So I have this gain of $4,800. And then there's cash. I have to pay $306 to make this go away. Okay. So let's double check my math. Notice that I've got debits of $310,800. I also have credits of $310,800. So, called a bond. Callable bonds usually do end up in gains and losses. So, we calculate the gain or loss by taking what I have to pay to get the debt off of my books and compare it to the carrying value. Okay, all we have left now is one quick ratio. Let's look at that ratio and we'll say that chapter 12 is done. Remember, I did not do problem number 1. I want you to go look at problem number 1 on your own. It is somewhat unrealistic in the fact that most people do not charge simple interest on loans. But our ratio is debt to equity. You have to love a formula ratio that tells you its formula in its name. Debt to equity. So we know that debt is liabilities. This is my total liabilities over total equity. So, it shows the proportion of liabilities to equity. A greater ratio of 1 indicates that we are financing our assets with more debt than equity. Unlike our real life, where we might try and keep our debt down, for a business, sometimes it's more advantageous for us to buy our assets in debt than it is equity, right? Because we know at any given time, assets always equal liabilities plus shareholder equity. So this equals 100%, right, of this 100%. So I'm financing my assets either through debt or by issuing stock. And sometimes it's just easier for us to buy it cash out of pocket when it's you and me, because we don't want our debt to go up. But in a business, it's not such a bad idea to have debt. In fact, the government, or the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, they actually subsidize debt because we get interest expense as a deduction on our income statement, which reduces our taxes, whereas the dividends that I pay my shareholders are not tax-free. So a lot of times a business would rather issue debt and just have somebody that they owe than take on more owners, because owners tell them what to do, and so we businesses don't like that so much. So sometimes it really does behoove us to take on more debt. It's not that I should be worried if the ratio is above 1. It just indicates that I'm financing my assets more with debt than with equity. So it says Vaughn Company has $60,000 of liabilities, $50,000 of shareholder equity at the end of 2018. What is their debt to equity ratio? Well, I would take 60,000 and then divide by 50,000, and so give me 1.2 times. Right? And if I asked you just for fun what my total assets were, you better tell me, because we know that assets equal liabilities plus shareholder equity, 110,000. And that, my class, is chapter 12. So I need you all to do the chapter 11 and 12 DSM. I need you to also do the chapter 11 and 12 homework. Have a great week, and I will see you next week with a new lecture. Bye-bye.